Now let's turn our attention to actually creating user-defined functions. Let's start off by taking a look at a scalar function. A scalar function is going to return a single value. The way that this is created is by utilizing create function, give it a name, the parameters that you want to accept, and then returned and then the data type. The definition is going to go after the keyword as and between your begin and your end. Now, quite frequently, what you'll wind up doing on that first line is declare a variable for whatever it is that you're looking for, and then simply return that back at the very end. Two real quick notes before we go off and take a look at a demo. First up is the fact that if you want to modify your function, it's just like working with stored procedures or with a view, that instead of you using create, you simply use alter. The second thing to note is the fact that if you want to get rid of a function, it's simply drop function and then specify its name. Now let's take a look at how we can create a scalar function. What I want to do is I want to create a user-defined function that will accept a customer ID and return back the most recent order for that customer, the most recent order date. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to build up the select statement first and then double back and we'll set up the user-defined function around it. Now I'm going to start off by saying declare at most recent order date is a date time. So just normal variable declaration. And then I'm going to say select at most recent order date equal to max order date. Now this is a new little bit of syntax that we haven't seen yet. What this will allow us to do is it will allow us to set a variable value by going off and executing a SQL statement and getting that from a table. So of course, this is going to get the most recent order date, the maximum value there. I'm going to say from sales order header, and then I'm going to say where customer ID equals at customer ID. Now I'm going to build that one up here in just a moment. That's going to be the parameter that our user-defined function is going to accept. The big thing that I want you to notice here is just that we have a normal select statement, and that's really it. So now let's turn this into a function. So I'm just going to click up at the very top here, and I'm going to say create function, and let's put this into the sales schema, and I'm going to say UF underscore for user function, and I'm going to give this a name of most recent customer order date at customer ID as an integer, and this is going to return a date time as begin, and then I'm just going to click right to the very end here, put in two little carriage returns, return at most recent order date, and then end. And just like that, we've built a function. So now let's go ahead and execute this. And then let's test this. So I'm going to test this just by doing a real quick copy, make my life a little easier there. And I'm just going to say select sales dot, and then the name of my function. One little thing, by the way, about calling functions is that you do need to use two-part naming, which we've learned we should do anyway, but you do need to do that with functions. And then I'm going to pass in my customer ID of 676. Going to highlight just that bottom part just so we can execute that part. Hit execute, and sure enough, there is the most recent order date for customer 676. The next type of function that we have is an inline table value function. An inline table value function is going to return a table, thus the name, but it's going to do so on a single select statement. In fact, in a lot of ways, that inline table value function is pretty much identical to a view that accepts a parameter, because just like a view, single statement, it's all I'm allowed to have here. Now you'll notice the syntax. Create function, give it a name, the parameters that we want, and then just simply returns table as return, and then the select statement. So you'll notice there's no begin, there's no end, nothing like that. It's simply return, and then you have your select statement immediately thereafter. Let's take a look at how we could create an inline table value function that would return back all of the order dates for a particular customer. So I'm going to come back over to my Management Studio, open up a new query window, and once again, I'm going to start with the select line. So I'm going to say select order date from sales order header, where customer ID equals at customer ID. So again, just normal select statement. We've got our little variable there. That's going to be our parameter. Let's go ahead and build that up. I'm going to click up at the very top there, and I'm going to say create function sales UF customer order dates at customer ID int. We simply say returns table as return. That's it. And so now we've got our inline table valued function created. Let me execute this. Going to sneak down to the very end. And let's just use it like we would a normal select statement. So I'm going to say select order date from sales UF customer order details, and let's pass in that 676 again. Let's go ahead and execute that. And sure enough, there is every single order date for customer ID number 676. The last type of table valued function that we have is a multi-statement table valued function. Pretty much the exact same concept that we saw before. It's going to return a table, but the big thing here is that we can use complex logic. So we can have multiple statements, CTEs, table variables, basically whatever it is that you might want to set up, you can do that inside of a multi-statement table valued function. As a result, these are a lot more powerful and potentially a lot more flexible than an inline table valued function. Now, the way to create this is going to be a little bit different than what we've seen. Still going to be a create function, give it a name, accept parameters, returns. So we've sort of seen that already. But here's where things are going to get different. What we're going to do is we're actually going to declare the variable right up front. So give it a name, specify that it's a table, and then immediately afterwards have the table definition that we want. So we can list off every single column that we might be using inside of there. The rest of this is then going to be as begin, and then we're going to have whatever logic it is that we want to use where we put the data into that table variable. And then finally, once we're done, we simply say return. That'll automatically return back that table variable. For my demo here, I'm actually going to pull the pre-baked cake out of the oven just because there's going to be a fair amount of code to make this work. What I've got is I've got a multi-statement table valued function that will accept a parameter of 0 or 1 based on whether or not we want to see the contacts that have or have not placed an order. Where 1 is going to be true, we want them to have placed an order, where 0 is going to be false, where we don't want them to have placed an order. Let's take a look. So I've got that over there on my third tab. And what you're going to notice up at the very top is exactly what we had on the slide, where I've got create function, give it a name, my parameter, contacts with orders. Again, if it happens to be a 1, we want the customers with orders. If it's a 0, we want them without. You'll notice that we've got the table declaration down below, so returns the variable, declare that as a table, and you'll notice my contact ID, that's going to be my column, so just like a normal table definition. And then we've got the rest of our logic. Now inside of here, I've got a little bit of an if statement going on where I'm going to say if my contacts with orders equals 1, and then that begin end section, that's going to be the true side. So if it happens to be 1, then what we're going to do is do our basic little select statement from person.contact as C where exists, and then we go into the sales order header. On the flip side, if it's false, then we're going to be down at the very bottom. And then what you're going to notice is that we've got the basic same logic. The only difference, of course, is going to be a not instead of an exists. Let's go ahead and execute this. Let's go ahead and test this now. So I'm just going to come down to the bottom here, and I'm going to say select contact ID. If you remember, that was the name of our column. I'm going to say from sales, UF contact order details, and I'm going to pass in a bit of 1 the first time. That's going to be for people who have placed an order. And so you'll notice that we get 19,119 rows. And if I want to test the other side, let's go ahead and change that to a 0. That's going to be all of our contacts without an order. Execute that. And sure enough, we only get 853 rows this time around. So there's our third type of user-defined function.